This, guys, is Lama Avenue in Bel Air Park. So the last time I was entering Bel Air Park, that's yesterday, in yesterday's video, I misspoke. I call it Bel Air Gardens. Bel Air Park is actually different from Bel Air Gardens. I want to show you the other end of Bel Air, the end of Bel Air that is closer to Georgetown, and it's actually a little more industrial than the residential end. This is the end of Lama Garden. It's Lama Avenue at the intersection with St. Road. Now, this is the gas station we just came from. This is the Chronicle. So this is where, Chronicle newspapers are printed. This is where the Chronicle newspaper is printed. That is the national newspaper, usually heavily editorialized by the government, so it's basically the government's mouthpiece, and it's located here on Lama Avenue. Alright, located here on Lama Avenue in Bel Air Park. Now, I started out saying that I actually misspoke yesterday when I called this neighborhood Bel Air Gardens. It's actually Bel Air Park. Bel Air Gardens is another neighborhood located closer to the seawall, and on the other side, so 1 block away, is the street we walked on yesterday, and today we're on a parallel street in Bel Air Park. Bel Air Gardens and Bel Air Springs are closer to the seawall. Probably bring you that at some point in the future. But at this end of Bel Air Park, it's a lot more industrial, and I wanted to show you that there is, looking back at Lama Avenue in the direction from which we came, there is a texture to the neighborhoods. So while at the residential end a lot of rich people live, at this industrial end where they have the Chronicle newspaper, and I think this used to be Bounty. This property used to be part of a meat packing company, Bounty Supermarket. Right at this end of Lama Avenue, it's industrial, but there seems to be some commercial or residential construction going up. So I think the last time I walked through this neighborhood was about, 5 years ago, and now they're building this, what looks like a rental or condominium property. Right, that's started construction on it here in Lama Avenue in Bel Air Park. Now, Bel Air Park is, like I said, one of the neighborhoods, a kind of older neighborhood for rich residents, and I make a distinction between rich and wealthy only because of the magnitude of wealth involved. So here is the new residential rental or condominium going up here in Lama Avenue, close to the end with the intersection with St. Road, and in what used to be, or probably still is, the kind of industrial end of the street, right? It's closer to the city. However, as you get deeper into Belleair Park, what you see is these residential houses that have been constructed way back in the 1980s, perhaps 1970s or 1980s, based on the size and based on the fact that this is an older neighborhood. The street gets wider in this section, you can see, and these houses are let's say of a design that was popular in the 1970s and 80s, and the size, right, the modest in size. People who are building houses now want 4,000 square feet on the size of land. They don't even leave space for things like, you know, a playground for the kids and a swimming pool and slides. This is one house that has some land space. They use it to create a swimming pool, and this yard has some space. They use it to create some playground facilities. So this is what Belleair Park looks like. Now, Lama Avenue and Belleair Park is similar sounding in name to Lama Gardens, which is the neighborhood we looked at a few days ago, where we said wealthy people live because of all the large houses, you know, 4,000 square feet and bigger, that are going up. But this is in fact an older neighborhood, older residential suburb than Lama Gardens. And these houses, I say these people are rich because back in the, so somebody has a swimming pool and a dog. So back in the 1970s, when these houses were built, people who lived in these neighborhoods tended to be officials of the government, ministers of the government, CEOs. Now somebody's building a Mac mansion here in this location. So this is what they're building now, right? This is like 4,000, 5,000 square feet. And this is in comparison to what was built in the 70s, which was much more modest in size. This is probably twice the size. And the reason why it's different also is because they don't really leave much of the space on the land for things like a swimming pool or a park for kids, a playground for the kids. They just use up all the land to build the largest house they can fit on the land. And that's what's different, right? That's what's different about modern building, modern construction, modern houses being built in these neighborhoods. The people who are building new houses are now building them much, much bigger than they were built originally. And the people who were original residents of this neighborhood, which I call a rich neighborhood instead of a wealthy neighborhood, because these people actually started out as public servants. They were usually, you know, ministers of the government, or people who are permanent secretaries, people who are stably employed in long-term positions with companies, CEOs, for example, of companies, you know, education officers, and so on. So the houses were modest, and these people were rich because they were still earning a living by working every day. However, the wealthy people are the ones who have, you know, businesses abroad, businesses locally, and they have, this one for example has a swimming pool in the front, and they used the space differently back in the 70s and the 80s. This, for example, is one of the houses that probably was built in the 70s. This one too, in the 70s and the 60s. So it's an older neighborhood in terms of the date, right? So these houses were probably built. It's Argentina, large Argentine flag. It's probably the official residence of one of the ambassadors. So these houses were built back in the 70s, probably the 60s, and they were at that time some of the wealthiest or the largest homes in the neighborhood, in residential neighborhoods at that time. However, people who are building new houses now are building them much, much bigger. This land, for example, is the backside of GBTI's sports complex. Somebody's putting down a tennis court over there. Ideal. This is another, well, this is more like a company, right? No, it's executive suites. So they're actually converting this property into residential building. It's probably condominium or rental property. But this is in fact the end of Lama Avenue in Bel Air. And pardon? I have a YouTube channel. So basically this is the older neighborhood of the older residential neighborhood in Georgetown, an older suburb. The newer suburbs are actually going to be located further away. What's different about the new suburbs that are being built now is that they still are being built like the old housing schemes, right? What they did back in the 1970s when they had this plan to feed, clothe and house the nation is they built these housing schemes in which all of the homes were identical. They built these we call them houses on stilts now, but they built these houses side by side on some lots that were 40 feet by 80 feet, something like that, in South Ramveld Park, East Ramveld, depending on the neighborhood and the price point. The houses were all identical, and the problem with that is that it looks like a scheme, a housing scheme, compared to, let's say, a housing development in Marietta, Georgia, for example, where they build these houses similar in size, but from a variety of plans. So they might have several styles, you know, like 8, 9, 10 different styles of houses, and they would basically mix them up so that each house does not look identical, at least not in terms of its facade or its form factor. The shape of the house would be different. This one is for rent. It's rented by Century 21. So the problem with these new housing schemes that they're building, even the ones that are commercial, like these, the estates, I don't remember the name of the estate, they're building the houses maybe like the style of houses that you'd find in Florida, but they're all identical. And the problem with that is that it looks tacky, and it looks cheap, and it looks like it's mass produced. You know, it's manufactured. Now there's probably some reason to do it that way, because it's cheaper to say use exactly the same model and the same construction materials and the same architectural design, and to simply replicate that side by side for mile after mile of housing. But it is not necessarily where people who are wealthy, who have the means to build, would live. And beyond that, it's not properly planned, because they don't put in any of the required facilities for, say, living in a residential neighborhood. You know, places like parks and post offices and fire stations and schools, churches and mosques and temples, those are actually not being put into these residential neighborhoods that they're built. These houses usually have their own arrangements for security guards. This here in Bel Air Park. And what's also different about these new housing schemes that they're building, or well, different from what you'd find in, say, North America and Georgia, certain parts of Florida, apart from the fact that the houses are all identical without any variation, and apart from the fact that they don't have any residential facilities, meaning recreational facilities, parks and schools and so on, is that it creates a lot of unnecessary traffic, because it means all of those people who now live in this neighborhood, that is the new neighborhoods that they're building, have to commute for everything. For groceries, they have to get out of the neighborhood and probably drive into the city, drive into Georgetown, just so that they can buy groceries, or they can go to take their kids to school, or they can, get hardware, supplies, and so on. So it creates traffic because they don't put the facilities in these new developments. They don't put in the facilities that people would need on a regular and ongoing basis, right? They don't have supermarkets. They don't have the recreational facilities, the schools, things that you need to do every day. So people are constantly traveling, moving back and forth to get their stuff. And so it's inefficient. It's also unsafe. Creates a lot of traffic. What's the residential building that we passed coming in? So it creates a lot more traffic, a lot of unnecessary traffic, and it's just inefficient. Now I can go into details about what I dislike about the way they're constructing these housing schemes compared to housing developments. But I've decided instead to simply build my own housing condominiums, my own housing, commercial residential housing on land that I own, and use that as a model not only for me and for people going forward about what is possible. In other words, if you go to my website ecosmarthomes.gbtu.online, you'll see the homes that I'm building, the condominiums that I'm building. And what's different is that within a single building we have all the facilities that you need, so you don't really have to do this unnecessary commute. You're going to have supermarkets and food courts and dining facilities, dining hall, all of this that you would probably need on a regular basis, and that takes a certain amount of the commute out of your day. You're going to have gym facilities and recreational facilities, pool and so on, all of that inside the building. But that is the way we should be building a modern housing developments and communities now. We should be putting all these facilities within either the building, the complex, or the neighborhood. And what was good about these older residential suburbs like Bel Air Park is that, first of all of the houses were not identical. People built their own houses that are different from each other, and the neighborhoods are close enough to all of the facilities that they need, like a gas station at the corner here, like schools, which are closer now to this neighborhood, say, than the distance between schools and the neighborhoods that they're building, the housing schemes that they're building around the country. So there's not a whole lot of planning going on, obviously not a lot of sensible planning going on, but that's what's happening here, guys. We're back at Lissingen Road with the Tuesday morning traffic. It's about 8:30 in the morning, and so people are still heading to work on Tuesday. And this was Lama Avenue in Georgetown, Lama Avenue and Lissingen Road. Remember, you can purchase merchandise, channel merchandise from my online store. I'm going to have a store especially for my British subscribers, rnbrand.uk. That's going to be up and running in a few days. And for my American and Canadians, you can go to rnbrand.gbtu.online and purchase hoodies and sweatshirts and t-shirts and stuff that are merchandise created by me for this channel. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Support this channel. Remember, subscribe to all the other new channels I'm creating. The business channel is already up. Raffle Nation Business is already up and running. I'll be adding videos to Raffle Nation Business. In the case of Raffle Nation Business, I'll be able to explore some much more interesting topics, right? Be able to explore some much more interesting topics. So for example, I wanted to talk about cryptocurrency and Sam Bankman-Fried and how that company FTX imploded. I'll be able to do that on the business channel. You know, there are people who've been calling me and asking me, well, not calling me, but contacting me in a comment section or by email, asking me about trading on the stock market or trading currencies. I've actually done that in my time when I lived in New York and traded on the New York Stock Exchange. I'll be able to talk about all those things on the business channel, talk about my business strategy and so on the business channel, and not be boring some of the people who are really not interested in that kind of information. So that's why I'm setting up these channels, because then I can go into detail and people who are interested in that stuff will know where to find it, and people who are not interested in it are not going to be distracted from this kind of content, like the walk with me tours. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Let people know what's happening here in Georgetown, Guyana on a Tuesday morning in rush hour. Later.